Hello, seekers, or whomever may have happened upon this data pad. I'm glad you have found your way here to listen to this report, or story, more or less. The world we live in has changed so much in the past few years. I think it's 2030, 2032? I can't quite be certain. The world seems to be split between the Augs and the Naturals, as we humans find ways to continually improve our condition via technology and innovations, body enhancements, and many more. There are those among us who choose to refute the science in the hopes of staying, well, natural, free from enhancement or augmentation. Many claim the path we walk is similar to Icarus, venturing too close to the heavens, too close to the sun. And while our technology can certainly help us soar to these new and lofty heights, the events of Pangaea, or what many are calling the Aug incident, the madness, consuming signal that threw many Augs into a frenzied and brutal state, have certainly reverted humanity's advancement to a more segregated time, where Augs are forced, perhaps rightfully so, to their own buses, transportation, and refused jobs, and have quite literally been left behind from the masses of society due to the fear of their capabilities. And if another Pangaea event would occur, it could be devastating. But to provide more context, we should explain the world of today, or at least the world of 2027, to better understand the stage of our story. During this time, the world has shifted. It's been pushed ever upward by the technological advancement, some ready for widespread consumer use. Now, in the early 2000s and 2010s, humanity was presented its first series of mechanical prosthetics, not simply fake arms or legs meant to occupy what was lost for veterans or those who lost appendages due to accidents. Now, one project that was the precursor to many augmentations we see today started in the United States, where a man was given and operated one of the first robotic arms. A group of researchers and scientists from the Johns Hopkins Institute in Maryland were able to provide this man, who lost his right arm to cancer, a machine or mechanical substitute with the similarities of an actual organic arm. Traditionally, in that time, many prosthetics were just that, a fake arm or leg or foot or hand that had little to no actual functionality beyond being a placeholder for that missing appendage. Essentially, they featured no additional benefit, no advanced control or operation. It was simply an arm to be used as a blunt tool. However, with this first prototype, one of the few of its kind called an MPL, or a modular prosthetic limb, was controlled via nerve impulses, very similar, if not identical, to how most of your mind controls your own limbs through a series of impulses fired via your brain towards the limb of choice. Beyond the military applications of such a technology, the average day use for civilians or amputees opened the door to bio-augmentation super firms or corporations almost immediately after in the years following. Many businessmen and women alike saw a huge advantage in the market for this immense profit for programs, products, and projects akin to the MPL. Some would be funded by DARPA for military applications, others forecasted to sell for those who sought to replace, remove, or even change their physical makeup. Similar practices of body modification, at least in the same sphere of change, were also occurring quite regularly. It was practically becoming the new normal for many in the late 2010s, where plastic surgery, physical modifications, and other relevant augmentations carved out a very healthy and profitable market share. These first studies, projects, and programs, funded largely by world governments and consumers alike, opened the door to what many considered the next gold rush by 2020. Of these massive mega corporations, there was a Seraph Industries, a giant US-based corporation focused primarily on biotechnology, founded in 2007 by an individual named David Seraph. When Seraph took charge and purchased a failing Detroit auto factory, he repurposed the facility to focus on the manufacturing of automated prosthetics similar to the prototype NPL to be utilized for human implantations. In 2009, the US government would pass the Recycle Military Bill, which would finance prosthetics for any wounded veteran who would re-enlist into their military wing of choice. And the contract was awarded to Seraph Industries, and almost overnight, David Seraph and his corporation are one of the main drivers and exporters of advanced human augmentations. In 2010, Seraph Industries introduces the iKnow retinal prosthesis, which is capable of restoring sight to those who may have lost it by connecting a prosthetic to the optic nerve, where it was damaged or otherwise effectively able to cure blindness, eye wounds, and other damage to human eyes. But Seraph Industries was just one of multiple biotechnology firms that were taking advantage of government contracts and noteworthy market trends. Taiyang Medical, Isolay, Cadian Global, and Kusanagi are just a few of corporations to mention that had a considerable impact on the biotechnology market via their adaptations and innovations within the human augmentation industry. Each offered a set of unique advantages or products to their customers. During this time, it should be noted, at least, that a majority of these corporations were propped up by either private funding, so massive venture capital firms looking to cash in or out on the market trends, and lucrative government contracts from their respective home territory. China, India, the European Union, Japan, the United States, Brazil were a few prominent first world countries that helped propel the biotechnology industry to its position in 2027. Now, as these mega corporations began to control considerable market capital, so did the waning of influence of traditional world governments, almost transitioning the world from a government-controlled territories to influential spheres of these new mega corporations. Many Americans, for example, grew tired of the de-evolution of the political parties, seeing their constant partisan squabble as the primary driver to inaction in the important world-shifting elements such as climate change, wealth inequality, proxy wars, and widespread corruption. Many began to put their faith in these mega corporations as the actual drivers of world change, as opposed to the traditional belief held within world governments. Certainly, another report can dive into the geopolitical changes in the early 2010s, but hopefully this provides enough context as the changing of the guard, so to speak, in the impact and influence of politicians and traditional ruling parties, from the political elite to the now mega-rich corporate elite. But the rise of the NSF, the National Secessionist Forces, and the various militias in the United States is certainly cause for alarm. Ideally, at this point, the world stage is set, at least somewhat. Of course, there was a clear division between augs and naturals. Humanity has always segregated or sectioned off people throughout its long history, whether it be race, religion, or otherwise. And now adding the element of augmented humans being stronger, faster, with access to social augmentations like the Casey augmentation or the computer-assisted social interaction enhancer, which gave the user a clear leg up in conversations. They were able to analyze retinas, blood pressure, heart rate, and vocal dilation to be able to frame positive arguments or rhetoric in the user's favor. Now just imagine, just for a moment, you come in front of an aug. You see that they have several modifications. Arms, legs, and other body parts have been replaced with, well, machines. You, a natural, are at a considerable disadvantage. Now, not only from a physical perspective, but from a psychological perspective as well. We are social creatures, and we constantly attempt to use reason to equate us to them, find similarities, and build relationships. But as a natural, you lack those enhancements, those augmentations. You are human purely, but your peer is human and more. But in many naturals' minds, they are also less. foregoing their pure humanity in the favor of the assumed shortcut. The augmented path is often easier in many regards. Now, truly, this next step in human evolution is not a simply accepted one, regardless of how much potential goodwill could come from a being generated by becoming this augmented individual. This leads us into the events of the Aug incident, or the Panchaea event that would create a lasting divide between the Augs and the naturals, almost creating a separation between the human species where the issues of racism and segregation, seemingly an older pre-Enlightenment concept, would return in full force. The Aug incident. Now, this likely deserves its own report, at least to fully understand it. But from what we've gathered across the various reports via traditional media and dark web activities, this event was caused by a massive fault within biochip installations across all augmented users. Now, in 2027, there was a massive biochip withdrawal, primarily due to the World Health Organization's recommendation and study publishing that the current biochip of 2026 or prior would cause severe malfunctions in visual displays, arm and leg lockdowns, and the list was, well, quite extensive. Whether this was true or the tip of some larger-than-life conspiracy fantasy, this report can't speak to. But the coincidence of the biochip recall occurring and then the massive insanity outbreak in Augmented Humans during the Panchaea conference seems, well, almost too coincidental, too good to be true. To give you additional context, the biochip is an artificial implant designed to provide the user a more authentic connection between the mind and machine. It offers additional advantages to the user. Now, the only drawback is that it's fatal if left untreated. Now, to combat this, Darrow Industries would introduce the leading drug neuropozyne, designed to combat the glial tissue buildup around the biochip junction. Neuropozyne is one of the few drugs that is used in conjunction with augmentation. Otherwise, the body would just reject the foreign object, and in some cases, this could be fatal. With now thousands using this new biochip, after listening to the recall advice, a new plot seemingly emerged, which led us to the Aug incident, or the Panchaea event. However, Hugh Darrow would have other plans, some would say separate from the greater Illuminati conspiracy pushed by the WHO's recommendation in the first place, leading to a massive insanity-inducing pandemic in which any augmented individual who had received the updated biochip effectively lost themselves. In an instant, augmented individuals went insane, losing motor control, loss of augmented limbs, and in some extreme cases, loss of complete cognitive ability. In major cities, the death toll reached thousands, with families of augmented and naturals turning on each other, the naturals attempting to just live and survive for the next few hours. In certain areas, like the People's Republic of China, the incident had less of an overall impact, as the state media was controlled and the military policy immediately moved in to effectively put down the augmented, now treated as nothing more than animals. And then, as soon as it began, it was over. Hundreds of thousands dead, more injured or waiting to pass left in the streets, and the empty, blood-fueled housing. It was the single greatest loss of life in human history. Now, some suspect that Hugh Darrow was responsible for this event, as the last reported images and audio files from his Panchaea conference had him speaking about the limitations of augmentations and how it had changed humanity, that humanity had come to see his invention of the biochip and neuropozyne as a corruption to the human identity. He had hoped that the horror of this crisis, induced by the new biochip and the signal he began to send from Panchaea, would cause a human turning point. Truly, a man that lost himself in his own imagination, in his own pragmatism of what the future, of what humanity should be. His own genetics would never allow him to receive even the most basic augmentations. So many believe that this was some petty revenge upon the world, a child raging against the unfairness of the hand he was dealt. There are even some rumors and interpretation that Hugh was a part of the Illuminati, the very group behind the WHO's biochip recall, and the attempt of the Illuminati to control the Augmented. Whatever you choose to believe, there are certainly more sinister forces that work against us. And as we move into the next decade and beyond, the boiling points of natural and aug seem ripe for another human turning point. Whether you are augmented or natural, the next 10 years will see the world change for either worse or better. Hey everyone, so this lore report was probably about one of my favorite childhood games, or at least franchises. So like Deus Ex and Deus Ex Invisible War. Now I have to admit that I've actually never completed the full playthrough of an original Deus Ex, but I played the Invisible War almost like daily as a kid when it was first launched in the original Xbox back in 2003. Now, I'd argue that this title and the series, the complexity of character choice, the narrative storyline, while not the most complete runaway from the first title in the series, was a huge impact on my gaming life and first got me interested in the video game backstory. Deus Ex features a world with a similar narrative to our own, right? But with a larger focus on dystopian elements like body augmentation, social division, and considerable stretches from today's world. But it was never so unrealistic that you couldn't at least imagine a world close to the one projected in the games, at least in some way or capacity. It's not too hard to imagine a world like Deus Ex in maybe 5 or 10 years, maybe even 15 years our time, with people running around with complete body modifications or infused with nanotechnology. After all, some of the technologies presented in the main titles actually exist today, and you saw that in the initial report, which is where I got a lot of my, at least initial research to give you some of that connection between real world and game world. So with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I think I wanted to give you the additional recommendation that you can get all of the Deus Ex titles on Steam if you wanted to try it. I think you can still get some of them on the consoles. I'm not 100% sure. Now, if I was to give you any recommendation, I'd recommend starting with Invisible War first because it's probably the most user-friendly and then it still has that old school nostalgic vibe. Then I would recommend playing Mankind Divided, then Human Revolution, and then go all the way back to Deus Ex. Now, I realize I just recommended you play the titles out of complete order, but they all do a strikingly good job of informing you of the in-game backstory without too much context being needed. Now, I recommend playing it this way because, like most conventional, relevant experiences from today's game, you won't get super hammered by outdated systems, so you would see in like traditional RPGs or single-player journeys. It's sort of like recommended playing Skyrim first, then play Oblivion, then play Morrowind, and the user experience is slightly less streamlined every single time you jump into each game. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I'm going to quit rambling. There's going to be more videos, obviously, I think, within this sphere of games, depending if you guys want it. But I hope you guys are enjoying the Wednesday, Sunday lore schedule, and I also hope you are all staying very safe. With that being said, that'll do it for me, and I will see you guys on Sunday. Peace.